What is up, guys? Frosty Osty 0232 here today for another Frosty Features. What we have here today on Frosty Features is another member of our upcoming Masters of Evil team, Absorbing Man, the good old Carl Creel. What Frosty Features is, if you haven't seen it before, is a comic book background on the toons that you use in Marvel Strike Force. We like to just kind of give a nice background. We typically stay in Marvel 616 canon. There are other ones that we will reference or dive into a little bit, but typically we stick to whatever the comic book canon is. That's a thing. Fantastic. So, yeah, we're gonna get going. Absorbing Man. So, according to Scopely, Carl Creel was a violent boxer turned criminal when he landed in jail after being convicted of assault. While serving his prison sentence, Creel was selected by Loki, the Asgardian god of mischief, as his unwilling pawn in a plot against Thor. Loki secretly spiked Creel's drinking water with a potion composed of rare Asgardian herbs. This elixir gave Creel the power to absorb and duplicate the physical properties of anything that he touched or touched him, including mystical properties of objects and superpowers of beings. Under the name of Absorbing Man and using his newfound powers, Creel escaped from prison but lost to Thor in battle. Afterwards, Creel was recruited to join the Masters of Evil, where he met Titania, whom he eventually married. He clashed time and time again with Thor, the Incredible Hulk, the Avengers, and Spider-Man. All right, so that is, according to Scopely, that is Carl Creel. What we're looking at here, I like to kind of rate their description at the end. Their description is in essence from the comic books, so we do have some redundant information we'll cover. But yeah, so we'll see how that goes as we move forward. But from here, Absorbing Man. His name, Carl Creel. Said it like 50 times, actually. First appearance, Journey into Mystery number 114. Depending on where you look, there's a bit of an argument here. Some people claim that his first appearance is in Daredevil issue 1. This is actually his cousin, Rocky Davis. But it all comes down Daredevil. We'll talk about it, but boxing. It's referenced in the Scopely description. Carl Creel was a boxer, so there's a little bit of conversation to be had there, but it is not Absorbing Man as we know it. First appearance, therefore being Journey into Mystery number 114. It is a Thor story. Power / abilities. They were kind of hard to define in like a nice, concise wording. Usually I like to have just like one or two words or whatever. So the way I worded it was transitive physical absorption. So Absorbing Man is that, right? He absorbs anything he comes in contact with. Okay, so if he touches anything, he can steal the properties of that, or powers, or strength, or whatever. He can drain it from people just like Rogue. He also, the reason why I threw in the word transitive, this is super important. If he's not touching it, because this is a small thing, but the reason why he carries a ball and chain is this right here. He does not have to physically touch it himself. He can use transitive properties to touch things, right? So he can use, more or less he uses his ball and chain to touch other things. So if for example, if somebody was like, let's say, Mr. Fantastic was leaning against my bedroom wall and I was Absorbing Man, I could lean up against the wall as well and not touch Mr. Fantastic, but still absorb his powers, right? So this is very important to realize how utterly strong Absorbing Man can be, right? I've been saying it throughout my stream to but for the sake of the video, I find Absorbing Man to be an extremely underrated character. So yes, so transitive physical absorption was the wording I wanted to go with that. But ultimately, he can copy anything about the materials, life force, strength, powers, anything that he comes into contact with. Anything. Aliases. Crusher, his boxer name was Carl Crusher Creel, right? Crusher Creel, or the Duplicating Man. That was just sort of an identity crisis thing, if I recall, in the comic books. Yeah, things he goes by. Affiliations, Masters of Evil, Gamma Flight, and I put etc. there. He is in everything. Carl Creel, the Absorbing Man, is a villain for hire. Ultimately, if you promise him cash, he is on your team. Typically, if it has to do with doing bad things, he's not morally as evil as a lot of the evil people in like the Masters of Evil. He's not looking to just mass murder a bunch of people. He's just extremely selfish. But he kind of is just, he's not an anti-hero. He's a villain. All the way. So yeah, most recently Gamma Flight, most notably Masters of Evil, but he's also been affiliated with Hydra. He's been affiliated with various Zemo teams, the Illuminati, things like that. So you can kind of find him all over the place. He definitely is a plug and play character, and depending on who's writing him dictates his strength. Who died? His mother. So as a kid, and I'll dive into it right here. He born and raised in the Bronx. As a kid, he is being raised in a loving family, mother and father. Things are going well. His mother dies. His father spirals, and becomes physically abusive, and really kind of messes up. Everything goes to hell. Everything kind of messes up as far as Carl's life is concerned. He picks up what he can from his abusive alcoholic father, including the ability to he became a mechanic, etc. And then his dad, one of the small acts of kindness he did for his son was buy him his first pair of boxing gloves, which kind of led to him kind of starting his boxing journey. So he ends up leaving his father. He gets old enough. I think he's 16, and he ends up beating the crap out of his father because his father was trying to beat him. He beats the crap out of his father, and he takes off. All right. So that's sort of where you get that boxing career. So notably, he goes on to be a boxer. So famously in Marvel Comics, in the boxing world, everyone typically thinks of Daredevil's dad. So Carl Creel actually has a fight with battling Jack Murdock. So Matt Murdock, the Daredevil's dad, fights him in the boxing ring. But a similar group of people, as with Daredevil, right? The underground criminal situation likes to run the boxing rings. So Carl, at being a boxer, becomes he gets intertwined with some criminal organization run by the Owl, and he becomes their enforcer. So he's the person that shakes people down for money and makes sure, he's the one that's beating up people for not paying, etc. So that's how he's making money, and he winds up in jail. As you can tell by his typical costume, even his MSF model, he wears that stereotypical black and white striped, he wears the pants for the old chain gang type prison situation. A lot of Absorbing Man story, and I'm going to reference Frosty Features Titania a few times. I'm going to start here. A lot of his stories start with him in jail, or he ends up in prison some kind of way throughout the process. So we see that quite often. So the ball, I was talking about the transitive property. So not only he gets it from his first time going into a prison or whatever, but he uses it because he has an easy access to metal, so he can in a pinch, if he needs it, he has the metal. Also, it's very heavy, very strong, and he also uses it for that transitive property. So he uses it to throw and grab or touch onto things, so he can steal the power from a limited distance. So it is kind of an odd choice overall, but it's sort of what makes Absorbing Man. Absorbing Man is him and his ball and chain, and there are stories where he is separated from his ball and chain, so he goes and gets it. As far as I'm aware, in the comics that I've read, in the background and all my research, there's nothing particularly special about his ball and chain. It's just that he prefers the use of that specific one, because he does quest for it at least once in the comics. Moving on, relatives, relationships. Mary McFerrin is his wife. This is Titania. Check out Frosty Features Titania to talk about, to pick up on how they met each other, how they kind of got involved. I tried to avoid some of the Titania stories in this Frosty feature, because you can check out Frosty Features Titania for all that great stuff. We also cover the story of Jerry Sledge, his son. So it is we go over in Titania. We go over his son, Rocky Davis, cousin. I talked about him a little bit earlier. There's sort of a misconception that Carl Krill was in Daredevil #1. No, it was Rocky Davis. Rocky Davis is his cousin, almost brother, more or less. Because they're so close. Rocky Davis is also a boxer who is the one that's actually featured in Daredevil #1. But some people, for some reason, kind of get them mixed up. And he actually is his own superhero or super character. He's Highlight. So check him out. He's a power armor character. Notable events. This is crazy. Comics are not just for kids. There's a point where Carl Krill becomes cocaine, okay? So in working with criminal organizations, Carl Krill gets really, 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 really into drugs, right? Because drugs make people high, right? So with Carl's powers, if he becomes the drug or narcotic or whatever he is taking, he gets essentially a doubly high, right? So he actually, one of the criminal organizations, they don't like how it's led by the Owl again. They don't like how he is, he's sort of, he's a loose cannon. He kind of does what he wants because he's very strong. And as Scopely pointed out, his powers come from Loki, right? And his whole thing is that he's supposed to be the strongest being on Earth. It was sort of the attempt for that Loki was trying to go for, and then he gets his butt kicked by Thor. Anyway, so he's extremely cocky. He fights with the big guys, right? He goes toe to toe with the Hulk and walks away from it, right? So he's very cocky and he doesn't follow orders really well. So this criminal organization essentially trapped him using drugs, trapped him in a corner, and they made him do copious amounts of cocaine so he would turn into cocaine. And then they used fans to blow him into pieces. And then they bagged him and then they sold him so that people would take Carl Krill. They would take Absorbing Man drugs. Right? So his little pieces. So he actually gets distributed as a drug by a criminal organization run by the Owl, as a form of cocaine, right? So as a reminder, if you're buying comic books for your kids, know what you're buying, because this is really wild. So yes, they distribute Absorbing Man as a type of cocaine. This type of cocaine gets you extremely high, and you get the powers of Absorbing Man for a short period of time. But because they aren't the true Absorbing Man, they cannot revert. So anything they absorb, they keep, which means if you absorb a brick wall, you die. So most of the people that did the drug ended up dying, and it was a big deal. And then, after he was distributed and taken by a lot of people, he, use your imaginations, kids, but he ends up reconstructing. So Absorbing Man, part of his thing is he has part of his absorption powers, he has ultimate molecular capability to change himself. So anytime he gets blown to pieces, even at a very small molecular level, he can pull himself back together. So he is in essence unkillable. So he gets used by all these people, and then the next thing you know, he's putting himself back together in a sewer. So, you can kind of assume how he got there, but let's go into it. Drugs pass through people's systems, in specific ways, and then when, things, pass through people, they go to the sewer. And then and then you have your supervillain rebuilding himself in the sewer. This is an actual story written on paper. So check it out. So anyway, he gets mad. He puts himself together in a sewer and he realizes what's been going on, and he gets pretty mad about the situation. Honestly, for good reason. So he gets pretty mad. So he goes and he attacks the criminal organization that made him into cocaine, and he goes to rip them apart. And yeah, so he kind of he goes on a rampage. He takes them all out, and this gets the attention of Spider-Man. Once again, Frosty features Titania. Check it out. There's other stories with Absorbing Man and him, but Titania is deathly afraid of Spider-Man. He kind of points out, but anyway, he gets the attention of Spider-Man. Spider-Man uses Absorbing Man's greatest weakness, and that's the fact that he's kind of dumb. And I don't like the dumb designation, but the only reason why I feel like Absorbing Man ever is beaten by certain people is because he's not thinking. So, Spider-Man taunts him and do like this gauntlet of like, he's like, well, I bet you can't absorb this stuff. And he starts throwing all this stuff at him. And eventually Spider-Man's like, well, let's use these 2 chemicals. And when he absorbs them, that will cause an explosion when they react. So he just blows up Carl Creel and that stops him. That stops him in his tracks. So Spider-Man saves the day. Okay. Next I want to talk about Pleasant Hill. So in the Frosty Features Titania, we talk about Titania has a situation where she decides to go straight, live a good life, and Carl Creel agrees to go with her. Well, where we diverge in the Titania story, check out Frosty Features Titania for the 5th time. Where we diverge in that story, Carl gets, she goes one way, Carl gets arrested, and he gets put in a new prison called Pleasant Hill. Pleasant Hill brainwashes people and has them. It's very WandaVision, which is why I wanted to bring it up. I thought it was really interesting. They transform him into a model citizen named Harold, who is an ice cream salesman. He runs an ice cream shop, and so he's in prison. He's living the life of this ice cream salesman guy, and he's not doing anything bad. He's a model citizen, super great. And then Zemo and a bunch of villains attack Pleasant Hill to try to rescue the people within the town. One of them being Elektra, and Harold actually falls in love with Elektra. Nothing crazy really super happens there, but yes, he falls in love with Elektra while in the situation. But yes, so Zemo, the Hood, and Titania, and a bunch of other villains, they attack Pleasant Hill. They break everybody out. And they, in the meantime, Whirlwind, which is another power armor villain, kind of gets back their idea. They remember who they were, wakes up Absorbing Man gets pissed, and Whirlwind and Absorbing Man are tearing the place apart, and then Zemo and everybody attack, and they destroy Pleasant Hill. And then one thing I find really interesting, this is just one of those little minutia of characters that just makes it so good, is that Absorbing Man points out that the happiest point in his life was when he was Harold selling ice cream, because it was so basic, and he could, he could make a living doing something honest, and that was the high point of his life was being somebody else selling ice cream, which I thought was really crazy. But he's still really mad about the situation. Shield, it was the one that ran Pleasant Hill, so he then is on a revenge spree. He lets his anger get the better of him, and he's on this revenge spree towards Shield, because it doesn't cross his mind that he could just have that life in the real world. He's got to take out Shield for imprisoning him that way anyway. So it is what it is, but it's a really neat story. So definitely check out that run, that Illuminati run. We referenced it in Titania as well, but really cool stuff. Check it out if you're looking at it. All right, now we're gonna talk about power level. So, Marvel Strike Force doesn't care much about power levels, but I do. So, the way that we do power levels here on Frosty Features is that we look at it this way. Multiversal. That means that you can end all of reality at once, not just your reality, but other realities that exist. You could end all of existence in a single movement. Universal means you can end your existence, probably go over to another universe and end their existence. It'll take some time, but you can do it. Cosmic means you are a threat on a planetary scale. You can destroy small to large planets and potentially galaxies and solar systems with time. Time's going to be the big factor here. Nuclear means that you are a threat. You are a similar threat to that of a nuclear bomb. So you can take out level small cities up to maybe a planetary body with that work put in. Super soldier means that you are beyond the capable abilities of any given human. You are beyond peak fitness for a human. Baseline here being Captain America, typically meaning you could take out a brick wall or maybe a building or two with enough time and effort. City means that you are peak level. You are a trained high level assassin. You can take out any normal Joe, but as soon as the word super comes into play, you typically fall for the day, right? And then we've got Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that is spawned by Hela in Marvel's Strike Force, and once upon a time, he was no problem and nothing to be worried about. In this instance, we are equating Greg to the same level as your average human being, even though Asgardian physiology is better and higher. This is just for the sake of argument. He is at the human level, right? So, theoretically, if I have a deflated tire and enough, I did my push-ups for the day, I could theoretically take out Greg, right? So, in the instance of Absorbing Man, we have, I think this is a second for Frosty features, right? I think this is the second time this has happened, but there are more than one rating, right? At base level, Absorbing Man is a nuclear power level, at base level. At his weakest, at his work, where he starts off, he is strong enough to stand up to the likes of Thor and the Hulk and things like that. Absorbing Man is also, so that's at base level. That's just how he is without absorbing things. He's very strong. And with his ball and chain and stuff, he's at least that of steel, right? So nuclear being, he can level like large areas very quickly. There are stories where he actually like assimilates the ocean, or he becomes an island and things like that. All it takes is a nice drop from a side like that to level a small city, right? So on the easy end, he's at a nuclear power level, which is very strong in the Marvel Universe. Here is the thing about Absorbing Man. He is as strong as who he's fighting, right? He has the same powers as Rogue without all the withdrawals, right? And he's just straight up, a bad guy. So there are situations. There was a point where Doom got a piece of the cosmic cube and had Absorbing Man absorb it, and he becomes a cosmic level threat very quickly. Here's just to point out my next point of argument for this. So baseline nuclear. Some of the people. Here's a list of some of the people that he has defeated. Right. We've got Hulk. We've got Captain Marvel, right? These are some big ones. Then we move up to Sentry. Sentry being, not in Marvel Strike Force, but if you know who Sentry is, a bad dude, takes him out. Absorbing Man, for some reason, has Black Bolt's number. Loves to fight Black Bolt all the time and kicks the crap out of him because the screams, he absorbs them and he gets stronger, right? Also, Absorbing Man has taken on Dormammu and won, right? So there is actually a point where Absorbing Man absorbs cosmic energy to a point where he takes on Eternity, which essentially makes him he is as such that he could end reality, right? Especially with the power of the cosmic cube, he could legitimately just end his reality or whatever reality however he wants. So he ranges from nuclear all the way to universal. He does have a weakness to magic. He can absorb it, but he's still affected by spells, right? So it's important to note, but Absorbing Man ranges from nuclear to universal. So he is so far on Frosty Features as of episode 41, he is one of the strongest Marvel Strike Force characters, one of the strongest characters brought into Marvel Strike Force, as far as his sway. But yes, there is a situation where you can find him just beating the crap out of Dormammu. So check it out. Nuclear base level up to universal as far as evidenced by the comics, but he's limited by what he thinks to absorb, right? So it's really important on the end. So with all of that, how did Scopely do as far as our description? They were right on it. He gets his powers from Loki. He's supposed to be there to defeat Thor. He puts up a good fight with Thor. Most notably, he absorbs the powers of Mjolnir. Not the most incredible thing that he's absorbed, but yes, he obtains Uru, adamantium, vibranium. All that stuff is easy for him, right? So he typically does get defeated, and usually it's because he gets outsmarted. The only thing in this description, he meets Titania. If you watch Frosty Features Titania, that's the last time I plug it, I swear. If you watch Frosty Features Titania, he actually meets Titania before they join the Masters of Evil. So that is incorrect that they've got on here, but other than that, they did good. Nice try. It was worth the you know, that was close. As reading it, I was like, wow, they got this down, and then it's like the last sentence. It's like the second to last sentence that he says they meet Titania. What a small thing to catch on, but that's my job, baby. So that was Frosty Features Absorbing Man. I hope you had a good time. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments or other big points. Absorbing Man's been around for a long time, so there's plenty of things that I missed or left out. Let me know what your favorite Absorbing Man moments are in the comments, or if I got anything wrong or you disagree. Hit me up, like, share, subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. Also, as a reminder, I stream every week on Sunday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time at the link above. Come hang out. We record Frosty Features live and have a great time. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a fantastic, fantastic week. And most of all, people, stay cool.